Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Two Guys from Verona, with hosts Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. Each week, they bring you their take on the world today. Dan Perkins is a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, best-selling author, and founder of a nonprofit foundation for our injured veterans. Don Mazzella brings his years of journalism experience and insights to the world today. He's a veteran newsman currently running a series of online newsletters and magazines, and is also a book author and on the board of the National Robotic Education Foundation. Together on each program, these men will provide thought-provoking ideas and commentary on what is happening politically, financially, and socially. They will also give listeners a heads up on future happenings. We start off each program with Dan Perkins' essay on what he considers an important issue facing us.
Good evening and welcome to Two Guys from Verona. This is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
And thank you for joining us. By the way, if you want to get a hold of us, you can send us an email through host, that's HOSTS, plural, at twoguysfromverona.com. So we got a busy show tonight. I guess I'm up first. The title of my commentary for this section is called Deceit and Deception, the Democratic Party. As I was watching and talking to Don earlier today about how and he's going to talk about in his section about how the media is responding to Nancy Reagan's death, there's a little deceit there, but he'll talk about that in his section. I want to talk about how the Democratic Party has basically misled the American people, and our president has misled the world on a couple of things. Let's start off with deception. We were told that we needed to have Obamacare because 47 million people were without health care in the United States. And that really isn't true. Even back then, they weren't without health care. This is the deception. They may not have had insurance, but they were not locked out of health care. If they had a serious problem, they could go to an emergency room and they couldn't be turned down. If they didn't have the money, they couldn't be turned down. And that hasn't changed. But they decided to deceive us by mixing health care along with health insurance and putting them the two together, which really misled the American people. People don't understand that there is a significant difference between health insurance and health care. Don mentioned last week that the Obama administration was going to postpone again the implementation of the new premium structure until after 2017, so the Republicans can't use it as a weapon against Hillary, as she wants to continue Obamacare and improve it. The idea that we were supposed to cover 47 million people, and it appears that 27 million are still not covered. The program is losing about 1 million participants a year because of the cost of the deductibles, and the out-of-pockets are so horrendous. In addition to the premium, people can't afford to pay the deductibles and the premium, so they're opting for public health and not paying either one, the deductible or the health care, because they don't have the money. I think it was a very, very deceptive move on the Democrats' part to say that health care and health insurance were in fact the same. We have people in this country who are healthy, who have chosen, or previously had chosen, young people who had no injuries or no problems, that they didn't need health care. What they wanted was a catastrophic policy, and if they got terribly, terribly sick. So we have turned the medical system upside down under the deception of the American people that we will get health care for everybody in the country. Not going to happen. Now, the second part of it has to do with global warming. Now, Don tells me he's been talking about global warming longer than I've been around on this earth, and that's probably true. But this is another deception and deceit. The National Oceanographic Association recently had a report that talked about, in their press release, 58 years of global warming. But the chart that they put in the document was only 38 years. When other people went back and looked at the chart for the 20-some years that they left off, they found out that the average temperature change over the 58 years of the study was virtually less than 1/2 of 1 degree. Again, we're confusing global warming and comparing it to the problem that we have with supposed pollution, and we have climate change. So again, this is another area of deceit where the administration has conned the rest of the world into the idea that we're destroying the planet, that it's man that's doing it, but they're mixing together global warming along with climate change, and they are absolutely two totally different things. It just seems to me that the idea that we have to deceive people, and by the way, that deception on global warming has cost the world in 2014, the latest year I could find numbers, $395 billion, and they didn't do anything about changing the temperature. Don?
As usual, let me talk about Obamacare for a minute. Everything you said is true. If you remember, President Obama said if you liked your policy, you could keep it. If you liked your doctor, you could keep him or her. Well, both of those things have proven not to be true. In fact, a recent study by American Health Insurance Group indicates that less than 10% of the American people have a policy that even approaches what they had before Obamacare. It's a shame. No question. They lied about it. And as the various members of the administration leave to take the private jobs, they're admitting to the fact that they cooked the books in a lot of different ways. It's a shame, but it is the way of politics. We, you may know, have HSAfinder.com, where we've been talking about HSAs since their inception. Right now, if the numbers are to believe, and these come from 2 different sources, 20 million Americans are covered by HSAs, which are deductibles, which are the best retirement plans you can possibly get. They're better than anything out there because you don't pay taxes when you put it in, and if you spend it on medical, you don't pay taxes when you leave, and all the interest and monies you make under it are tax-free. It's a great plan, and Americans are finally tumbling to it because the trend is to have a high deductible policy, $5,000, which is where HSAs really shine. I'd like to add one thing to your global warming. I'm a kind of an archaeology buff, and if you go and look at the tree rings in the southwest of the United States, where the Indians, Native Americans as we're supposed to say, put up, cut trees and put them up and match the tree rings to the years, you'll see that there is a regular pattern of drought, of higher temperatures, lower temperatures, etc. We've been having a global change since the Neanderthals were in existence. So, and by the way, we just found out that 90% of the people in this world, in Europe and in North America, have Neanderthal genes. But what it does prove is that we've had change since time immemorial, and we will continue. Dan?
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a survey, I think it was done by Rasmussen, And 92% of the Americans who responded, voting people who responded to the survey, indicated that they believed that global warming was a hoax. And we're spending more money on global warming in the United States than we are on protecting the border in Mexico. And the music's coming on, so it sounds like we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages from our very important sponsors.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. They'll be right back after a word from their sponsors.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-750-6128.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care, as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-750-6128. That's 1-800-750-6128.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers was created to serve veterans who deal with the lack of sleep due to their injuries. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides a free MP3 player for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. To learn how you can help, go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us to help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Dan, let's give them the email address if they want to, if the audience wants to talk to us.
Sure. It's hosts at songs and no, I'm sorry. It's hosts at twoguysfromverona.com. I was thinking about my charity. I apologize. Yeah. I apologize.
Well, your charity is pretty good. Hosts with an S.
Right.
My talk tonight is about death and dying. In particular, in my family, we were hit with 3 deaths over the weekend. One elder, none of which were expected. It's interesting when you hear about someone that you expect to be dying, it kind of hits you. But when you out of the blue, 3 different people at 3 different age groups, suddenly, as the saying goes, past, it really hits you hard. We were, my wife in particular, the 2 of them were close friends. And she's really taken it hard. John O'Hara, an author we seldom read about nowadays, said, "We all die alone," and in this case, all 3 of them died in the night by themselves, and it's kind of sad. And I wanted to bring them up today to remember them, and also give a lesson for all of us. Death is really close by. We just don't realize it until something like this happens. And then that's my way of segueing into Nancy Reagan, whose death over the weekend, while it didn't surprise a lot of people, judging by how all of the obituaries were already set in type, but it's really interesting. What I thought was particularly egregious in my view was how all of a sudden she is America's icon. Now 3 days after her death, we're still seeing fashion spreads. We're seeing stories about her. Yet the media, the national media, when she was president, the first lady, and the real helpmate to one of the most popular presidents in American history, a recent survey indicated that unlike other presidents, Ronald Reagan has actually increased in popularity amongst Americans. Very, very interesting. And the other interesting thing about it was that this increase was also amongst the young people. But Nancy Reagan she was laughed at because she had an astrologer in the White House. Well, I don't know about you, but I look at the astrology pages sometimes. She was laughed at because she was such a fierce supporter of her husband. But now the American media is falling all over themselves talking about it. They're even going to televise her funeral services. And when was the last time we saw a First Lady's funeral service when she was out of office televised? It's really interesting. And then last week, if you recall, the founder of Chesapeake Oil, whether he committed suicide or what, we don't know. But his sudden death has thrown everybody. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal story about his financial picture. He even mortgaged his rare bottle collection and his homes and everything to keep his newest enterprise going. And the whole story is about the fact what a mess he left behind, and how the lawyers are all going to make a lot of money on it. But all of this kind of brings me back to the point. Death is close by, and we should prepare for it in any way we can. I look forward to seeing my parents and wherever we may be. I'm sure all of us do. But as we approach the end of our lives, because most of my life's behind me, I kind of look at death and dying in a whole new perspective. And to put a fine point to your Obamacare story, when you're young, you think you're immortal. That's why so few people, relatively speaking, have signed up for Obamacare, young people. And it's ironic. It's at 35 that you start thinking about insurance. I'm way past that point, and like your thoughts, Dan.
Well, there's an old Irish saying, we talked about it when we were talking earlier in the day, that death usually comes in threes. And it's not over until the third one dies. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it was a little scary when you told me you lost 3 over the weekend. It is a part of who we are, and there's a real challenge here, because we are in a society that is consistently evolving away from the image of God and religion and a hereafter. And so those people who have lost their way, who've lost their faith in the Lord, or whatever they call them, when it comes time for them to leave this earth, I wonder what they're going to be thinking about on their deathbed. Are they going to look back on their life and wonder, maybe there was a God and I made a terrible mistake? Don't know. And I think but it is an important thing to think about, because it is part of the process. The most devastating part of the process is when a parent loses a child, when a child dies before the parent. We've had that happen in our family, in our extended family, a couple of times. It's just terribly devastating. But losing a parent as a senior citizen still is a traumatic experience for us, and we as you write, if you say, Don, we face it every day. In fact, every day we live, we get closer to our ultimate termination. But the Nancy thing was, if a lot of people don't know much about Nancy other than what they're seeing in the papers today, I would strongly suggest they pick up Bill O'Reilly's book, Killing Reagan. It's a wonderful story about a relationship between the two of them, what a good woman can do to make a good man even better. And I read the book. Actually, read it twice because it was so enjoyable. And I'm not an old history buff like you are, counting rings on trees. I'm more contemporary history. I thought it was a wonderful story about how Reagan changed himself, changed his political beliefs, and changed the country. And you're right. I think that the young politicians today, where you hear Marco Rubio and you hear Ted Cruz talking about Reagan, and you hear people saying that perhaps Ted Cruz is the most like Reagan we've got in this batch of politicians. I think that what's going on is that we want to go back to a day when we were proud to be an American, and I think that pride of American citizenship is dying out as we, as the elder generation, go to meet our Maker. It's a sad thing when we lose a loved one, but it's a sad thing when we lose a country. And I have great fear that we're losing a country. And I don't know what's going to happen to the American people if we don't stop what's going on. I mean, I can talk to you about it from a financial standpoint, but where do we go? How do we survive? How do we not turn into a European country that the government pays for everything? So people die, countries can die, religions can die, and it's all inevitable to us as we pass through this great big blue marble, as they used to call it, looking at it from space. I think that it's sad that she's passed away. She was a great supporter of her husband, but you and I both have great supporters as wives. They just are not as much in the limelight as Mrs. Reagan was. But there are a lot of... Huh?
No, go ahead. I wanted to just make one more comment.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you've brought up a lot of things, but the thing about this country, I know with my parents, and I suspect with yours, we always thought as the next generation, as the generation that would do better than us, that would be happier than us, that would accomplish greater deeds. We're not seeing that in this generation. We're seeing that they can do financial engineering of corporations, but they can't build new giant corporations. They can't go out and land on the moon and do the various things. My father always said to me, "Go out and be better than me." I suspect your father said it in almost the same way. Mm-hmm. And we're not seeing that. What I am seeing is a generation of some young people that seem satisfied. I gave a lead to a young lady, and that was 2 weeks ago, for a job, and she has yet to call that job, that person. There seems to be a lack of get up and gumption.
Right. I agree. Okay, we need to take a break. Remember, if you want to send us an email, it's host, plural S, at twoguysfromverona.com. We'll be back shortly.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. They'll be right back after these messages.
The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Responds. This is the final installment of the Brotherhood trilogy, and over this series we've been attacked by terrorists using weapons of mass destruction and have begun to rebuild America from all the destruction. In the last book, America Responds, the Pathfinders have been charged to find the Brotherhood. Just as they're ready to close in and capture the Brotherhood, the President tells them, just follow them. The President develops a plan of attack not just on the Brotherhood, but on terrorists worldwide. Will the President's plan work? Will the Pathfinders succeed? Find out in the final book of the Brotherhood trilogy, The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Responds. For more information, go to www.danperkins@sanibel.com. That's www.danperkins@sanibel.com. Dan Perkins' new book, also available at Amazon.com.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-750-6128.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-750-6128. That's 1-800-750-6128.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, like we've been saying all the way through the show, if you'd like to write to us, we eventually want to get into taking calls on the air and also bringing on some guests. But to write to us, it's host, plural S, at twoguysfromverona.com. My third segment is kind of a continuation of what Don was talking about. It is an amazing thing that Don and I have seen in our lifetime, and our wives have seen the advances in medical science and the pharmaceutical industry. I know they get a bad rap from Hillary and Bernie and even from Ted Cruz. But it's the pharmaceutical companies in America who are leading the world in research and development of new drugs. Not all of them work. Some of them do. But what's happening today is now that the drug companies are beginning to find formulas that don't just treat people, they cure people. And let me give you a most recent example. Merck and Gilead and Bristol Myers have all brought out drugs that cure 99% of the time hepatitis C and hepatitis B. Cure. And they cure people in 12 to 24 weeks. Now it's expensive. It's like $40,000 $42,000 for a treatment for the entire period. But you got a 99% chance of being cured and not facing kidney transplants down the road, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, I remember when we got the polio shots, and we had the little thing they stuck us on the arm when I was in school. That's really the last major cure we've had in this country. We've developed a lot of things to treat cancer and to high blood pressure and many other diseases. But a major cure of a major killer, hepatitis C and hepatitis B, dramatic. I talked to some researchers over the last weekend when I was back in New Jersey visiting my new grandson. And they tell me that the technology that's being developed to treat leukemia and other types of cancer, they're telling me that they believe that the pharmaceutical industry is on the verge of virtually creating a series of new drugs with very low side effects that could cure cancer or many forms of cancer. Now, that's a plus and a minus. Somebody's got to put up the money, and I know I'm the money guy on this show. Somebody's got to put up the money and take the risk, because not every drug is successful. Not every drug gets out of all three phases of trial. Not every drug gets approved by the FDA. But we have companies who are willing to risk their capital and shareholders who are willing to invest money with those companies if they can find a cure for another disease. We have a real problem. We have politicians who think they're doctors and business people, and many of the politicians who are criticizing the drug industry have never held a paycheck in their entire life other than one working for the government. The idea that corporations are willing to put up their money and their shareholders' money to try and see if they can find a cure for a major disease speaks very well of the quality of the research that's taking place in the United States. But there are congressmen and senators and politicians running for president right now who think that we need to cut back on the drug companies. We need to not give them any advantages. If you talk to any parent today who's got a young child going into high school next year, you'll talk to them about their tuition bill. And when they get time to pay their tuition bill, when you ask them the question, why is it so high? Most of them will tell you that they've been told at the orientation sessions at the college or university where their child is going that under Obamacare, there have been dramatic reductions in the research grants from the United States government and the National Institute of Health in trying to find these types of cures. And so if the government is not helping industry by supporting it, it has to support itself. Colleges, therefore, are not getting the money from the federal government to do the research, so they have to raise the prices. It's costing the children to go, our children and grandchildren to go to college. This is a very complex situation. We want our drug companies to have a chance to make a reasonable return on their investment, to be able to recapture their cost, and realize that many of the drugs, more of them will fail than will be successful, and we have to help them by encouraging them as investors and individuals to fight this ridiculous discussions that are taking place in Congress and in some governorships around the country. It makes no sense to try and stifle the creativity and the research capabilities of some of the leading drug companies in the world. And Don, what do you think?
Well, I just had my second kidney operation, and I lost one kidney years ago, and I almost lost this other one. And thanks to medical science, it hasn't happened. Both of them were the cancer, and I couldn't agree with you more. The very idea that I would have to go on the dialysis and hopefully find a kidney donor was just frightening, and probably scared me more than anything else in the last 40 years. And everything you say is true. There's new legislation coming down the pike, making it easier for people to knock off patented drugs. We're seeing a real assault on Big Pharma. God knows I'm not the biggest fan of Big Pharma for many reasons, but they have done a tremendous job, and despite the reduction in research by the big pharmas, they've had some remarkable breakthroughs, and I couldn't agree with you more. But I disagree with what you said about the colleges. The reason the colleges tuition has gone up so high is A, that they don't practice being good managers, and B, the more the tuition, the more they can get in government grants, Pell scholarships, and all that other stuff. I think we're in for a very austere change over the next 10 years, brought about by the simple fact that there ain't that much money to go around anymore, and something's got to give. Back to you, Dan.
Yeah, I agree with you. I happened to start a dialogue last week with something that could be incredibly exciting for veterans in the United States. And 1 in 4 Americans, Don, is now diagnosed with diabetes. And 40% of the adult population in the United States is diagnosed as either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Diabetes is a huge problem. And eventually, even with treatment, ultimately leads to kidney dialysis and then looking for the possibility of a transplant. And there's an organization called Living Donors who has a program that they try and find matches with people who are alive and healthy, who are willing to give one of their kidneys to somebody else. And I spoke over the weekend with a gentleman who was on kidney dialysis. He heard of this organization, Living Donors. He applied, he was tested, and within 3.5 months he got a kidney. If you're on the government waiting list, it could take 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years to get a kidney. So it's... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm a diabetic, and the way you cure diabetes, or at least keep it at bay, is exercise, the right food, don't limit it, and be smart about it. take the drugs that will work for you. But when they talk about this 40% figure, I always laugh at it because we're all essentially pre-diabetic if we really came down to it. But the idea is it's what you do with your own body that counts. There's a wonderful Limelighters line that that old trio group that said, "Clean mind, clean body. Take your choice." But in this case with diabetes, you can have both. And I really urge people. We didn't start out this way, but I really urge people, if they think about it, do something about it now. Don't wait until it hits you.
Yeah. Yogi Berra, the famous catcher for the New York Yankees, said one time when he was asked about being close to 90 years of age, he said, if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. We always seem to be able to figure out what we need to do after it's too late to do it.
Yes.
And but I do think that it's without research, without medical research, we're not going to help a lot of people. And we have the organizations who are willing to put up the money to try and research. There is a piece of research that is being discussed at the moment, Don, which really bothers me, and it was in last week. There is a group proposing in England that they're going to harvest fetuses for the purposes of extracting stem cells to do research to create new drugs. I have a hard time with that one, and in many cases I find myself I'm in a minority. I look at what's happened in all those videos of Planned Parenthood, and when we think about dying, as you pointed out, we think about having, if it's our parents, we think about them dying with dignity. I'm really sad that your friends all died alone. Nobody should have to ever die alone, but I realize it does happen, and hospice is a great help to make sure that somebody doesn't die alone. But we have to remember that the old fogies like me and you, Don, are the dying generation, but we're also responsible for the country the way it is, and the next generation is responsible for what the country can be. And I think it's important for a lot of people to understand that they have a responsibility. And that means taking care of themselves, to get involved, to make commitments to other individuals and to medical societies, trying to help. And I think that's one of the things that's really missing, Don, is that in many cases we're the most generous country in the world, but I want to say I think we're less generous than we were another generation ago. I think we don't care as much as we used to.
It's funny. Wilbur Jackson, the first black mayor of Atlanta, was talking about the change in society, and he said when he was growing up, and this is growing up in a black neighborhood, the women all looked out for the kids, and if he did something wrong, they would report it to his mother and father. And it's funny. I could say the same story about my neighborhood, and I have a hunch you could say the same story about your neighborhood.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore. We're afraid to get involved. We're afraid that people are going to say something. And if you say something, they'll get angry at you, not at the kid who's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It's a sad part of life, but it's an accurate part. It's an everyday occurrence. And that's, to me, is the shameful part of what's happening to our society.
Yeah. So we gotta take another commercial break. Remember, if you want to write to us, it's host, plural S, at twoguysfromverona.com, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. They'll be right back after a word from their sponsors.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They're the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-750-6128.
A Place for Mom offers free one-on-one advice from local advisors and a personalized list of senior living communities you can visit. If you have questions about senior care for your mom or dad, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
Call A Place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free ebook on financing senior care as well as free information on senior living communities in your area. Call 1-800-750-6128. That's 1-800-750-6128.
The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Responds. This is the final installment of the Brotherhood trilogy, and over this series we've been attacked by terrorists using weapons of mass destruction and have begun to rebuild America from all the destruction. In the last book, America Responds, the Pathfinders have been charged to find the Brotherhood. Just as they're ready to close in and capture the Brotherhood, the President tells them just follow them. The President develops a plan of attack not just on the Brotherhood, but on terrorists worldwide. Will the President's plan work? Will the Pathfinders succeed? Find out in the final book of the Brotherhood trilogy, The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Responds. For more information, go to www.danperkins@sanibel.com. That's www.danperkins@sanibel.com. Dan Perkins' new book, also available at amazon.com.
In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Well, this is where we have to take a look at the near term, and being a money guy and been watching the markets, probably the biggest story of the last week, and potentially maybe the biggest story this week and for weeks to come, is what's happening with the price of oil. On my money management website, Money in Motion, it's mot.blogspot.com. I put up a chart this week that shows what's happened to the price of crude oil. And 3 times in the last 5-6 days, we have gone to $34.25 a barrel and fallen off. The last time we hit $34.25, we went through $34.25, and in fact this morning we hit $39.90 a barrel. I think it will probably hold in this level to just under $40, but could run between now and the middle of the year, maybe to $40-45 a barrel. The frackers are telling us $40 a barrel, we're back in business. The Saudis and everybody else in the Middle East can't make money at $40 a barrel. We have about a 2 million barrel surplus per day, but what's been happening is that surplus has started to come down, and even with Iran back in the market. So I think that $34.25 might be a holding area on the downside, not that it couldn't go lower, but a downside for crude oil. And I think that if we get a Republican president in November, and we get a good solid majority, and we keep the majority in the House and the Senate, we could see a very significant year-end rally as people begin to think that maybe America can come back again. It's very important that we understand that oil is the most productive energy in the world, and green energy, wind, solar, are not commercially viable at $34 to $40 a barrel for crude oil. So keep watching crude oil, and you'll see which way the markets are headed. I think it's up to 40, maybe 45 by midsummer. Don?
Well, I wanted to talk about an interesting phenomenon that's longer term than that. You know, Harper Lee, just the author of To Kill a Mockingbird, recently died. And just before she died, she published her second novel, both featuring Atticus Finch, her father in real life, etc. And it's very interesting. the numbers are coming in now on the second book. The first book celebrated America, made a wonderful movie with Gregory Peck, talked about all the values you and I espouse, and a lot of Americans of our generation did. But she then turned around and published a book about her father, who was a racist and a few other things, etc. Not a very pleasant character. Well, what I've heard from the publishing world is that the novel is a dud. That yes, it will sell, it is a bestseller, but not to the expectations that they had hoped for, nor for the advance and what they paid. And why? Because I think America has changed. I think the people who took the To Kill a Mockingbird to heart are either dead or longing for an America that seems to be eluding us. It was a story of a lawyer who sought racial justice, a father who cared for his children, and a man who upheld the law and believed that the law was the most important thing. And if you read the new novel, which I had to read, you sit there and say, is this the same man? Is this the same country? Is this the same thing? It's a real sad commentary. But it turned out that the second book was actually the first book that Harper Lee wrote. And perhaps that's how she really felt. But I guess what I'm getting at, and perhaps the most important thing is, America has changed, and I don't think it's changed for the better. And it's not an immediate thing, but it's happening, and it's happening again and again. And I think this election for president is one of the most important elections in American history. And if we continue going down the path we're going, we are in trouble. As you know, Dan, I always recommend that people read Tacitus's Annuals, which is the story of the demise of the Roman Republic. And if you read it, as I did recently, or reread it, you realize how much what's happening today happened in Rome and ultimately led to the destruction of Rome. It's a sad commentary, and that's what I'd like to end with. But I'd like your thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a quick question about the sequence. So if I heard you say it correctly, Book 2 was really Book 1, and Book 1 became Book 2. Is that what you said?
Well, thanks to a very, very good editor. Harper Lee submitted the second book, the first book, and it was bounced. But the editor, a woman, I forget her name at the moment, convinced her to rewrite the book into what became To Kill a Mockingbird, even provided the title for the book. And if you read the book or saw the movie, it is a really, it extols all the values of American history. The other interesting thing is, as someone said recently on a TV program, that movie, To Kill a Mockingbird, could not be produced in today's environment. What a sad commentary.
Right. We have to be concerned about who's in the starring role, and who's the director, and who's the producer, and what color their skin is, as opposed to what their ability to act and to be master storytellers. That's part of the commentary that we're dealing with. Well, we're coming up on the end of our program again, sir. So it's let me say goodnight to you.
Well, before you do, tell us a little bit about your charity.
Songs and Stories for Soldiers is an organization that helps veterans to deal with suicide, which is part of the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And you can go to our website, songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us, learn more about us, and if you have an extra change in your pocket, you can make a contribution. So we're running out of time, and so I'll say goodnight to you, Don.
Good night to you, Dan, and we'll be back next week.
And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. If you want to communicate to us, you can get to us at host, plural S, at 2guysfromverona.com. Thanks for listening.